Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Hack. In today's video, we'll be discussing hybrid builds in the Elder Scrolls Online, and whether or not this is a viable playstyle in both PvE and PvP content, from beginner builds and solo builds all the way until endgame. Playing hybrid builds in ESO can be incredibly rewarding, as it's often easier to create a customized playstyle that works for you without having to stick to meta builds, meta sets, and rotations. But is playing a hybrid really worth your time, or will you eventually get stuck and be unable to progress further in the game? We're going to answer these questions and a lot more coming up next. Okay, so let's first break down what we mean when we talk about hybrid builds in the Elder Scrolls Online. Hybrid builds are often what players start with when they begin the game. It simply means that you use a variety of stamina and magicka skills for whatever situation you happen to find yourself in. Honestly, players don't have much choices early on in ESO when it comes to skills because they just haven't unlocked that many, so they take what they can get. Same thing goes for weapons and armor. So you might be playing, let's say, Sorcerer with Crystal Fragments and Lightning Flood, which are magicka skills, but you might have also gotten a really strong two-handed sword, so you use that as well with some stamina-based skills thrown in, like Dizzying Swing and Brawler. What you have here is a basic hybrid build, which uses a combination of magicka and stamina skills to be successful. Below level 50, your character's stats are actually increased in strength, or battle leveled in other words, to match the enemies of the zone that you're in. This is why new players can jump into ESO fairly easy and play alongside more experienced players, at least for easier content. This makes hybrid builds completely viable from the beginning of the game, which is great, because it's just a lot of fun for players to play in this way. It's also very similar to traditional single-player Elder Scrolls titles like Skyrim and Oblivion, for example. I know a lot of players come from backgrounds with those games, so it's just an easy transition for them to get into ESO. Now, the difficulty for a hybrid setup, like what we just talked about, really only comes up after level 50, when you try to take on more difficult content, particularly group content. This is because beyond level 50, your stats and your gear become more important, specifically when it comes to scaling up or increasing both your damage and your healing outputs. Damage in ESO for the longest time has only been based on the skill type that you're using, whether it's a stamina skill or a magicka skill. For example, if your skill costs stamina to cast, you can improve its efficiency by increasing your build's total stamina or total weapon damage. And the same thing is obviously true of magicka builds, where the best way to improve those skills and their efficiency was by increasing your build's total magicka pool or your total spell damage. This sort of binary form of scaling really left hybrids out of the loop when it came to build efficiency after level 50 in ESO. So we'll call this type of build a hybrid build 1.0, and this is pretty much how it's always been in ESO. It was not very well optimized, it was not very efficient, especially when you compared it to a stamina-focused or a magicka-focused build with stacked resources. Now, there have been some sets like the original Pelinal's Aptitude or Mechanical Acuity, and you could also split your stats with, let's say, the right race like Dark Elf, the right food option and potions. All of that you could sort of make it work, but it wasn't easy, that's for sure. Now, luckily, there have been changes made to the game recently, and one huge change coming up in the next patch that will really take hybrids to the next level and make hybrid builds more viable than ever. So I just said that hybrid builds in ESO are going to be the most viable they've ever been, especially in the next patch, update 33. That's completely true. There are many reasons for this moving forward. One of those is a change that actually happened recently, where most sets in the game now have hybrid stat values, which are going to make things quite a bit easier. Now, take the Mother Sorrow set, for example, which is an extremely popular magicka-based set, and has basically been the meta for magic users now for a while. This set now gives critical chance instead of just spell critical. This means that the best stat bonuses for Mother Sorrow, which is the crit chance lines, particularly that 5-piece bonus, can be used on any build to buff any skill's critical chance, whether it's a magicka skill or a stamina skill. Another great example of recent set changes is the Briarheart set. The 5-piece bonus on this set now gives both weapon and spell damage together, meaning that any build can use this set now regardless of what types of skills you're using and still get a big benefit. Again, either weapon or spell damage, whichever stat your build needs the most. Here's one more example. Spriggan's Thorns now gives offensive penetration rather than just physical penetration. This means stamina-based skills like Dizzying Swing, or Magicka-based skills like Crystal Fragments will both benefit equally from the penetration provided by this set. Now, you should also note that the bonuses for Magicka and Stamina stats were not hybridized, and I think that's on purpose. So, for example, Mother Sorrow will still be slightly better for a Magicka build because it has a max Magicka bonus on the 2-piece, but that's still a small difference when compared to all of the other usable stats, all the crit chance on this set, for example. And also when you consider many sets in the game don't have any Magicka or Stamina bonus at all, which makes all of their stat lines pretty much the same for a Stamina-focused build, a Magicka-focused build, or a complete hybrid setup. The point here with sets in the game is that there's no longer a limiting factor when it comes to creating a hybrid build in ESO. But now, literally any offensive set in the game, whether it's crafted, overland, dungeon set, or trials set, these are all going to give you now the stats that you need to set up a hybrid, and that is a really big and positive change. Let's move on next to the topic of passive skills in ESO and how many of these now benefit hybrids so much more than they have in the past. We'll look at armor passives, weapon passives, as well as some important guild passives here that you need to know about. And yes, most of these updates went into effect last year, but they still have a huge impact on how you create your build, and understanding all of these passives is going to make a big difference in setting up a hybrid build especially. Okay, so let's jump into our armor skill lines here, starting with light armor, and what's going to be useful for hybrid builds. There's actually a lot here that you'll need to know about. So my favorite passives, at least for light armor, it's going to be Evocation. This is going to increase your Magicka recovery, as well as reduce the cost of your Magicka skills. And this is based on how many pieces of light armor you have equipped. Currently, I have 2 pieces equipped on my hybrid Nightblade setup, and you can see I'm getting 8% recovery, 4% cost reduction. Next, the Prodigy passive is for crit chance. So both weapon and spell critical rating is going to be increased by about 1% for each light armor piece equipped. And then finally, Concentration. This is our physical and spell penetration bonus. Now for medium armor, we'll see the Dexterity passive. This is more focused on critical damage instead of crit chance, as well as healing. So 2% bonus there for every piece of medium armor equipped. We also have Windwalker. This is going to be our sustain passive for medium armor. So this is similar to the light armor passive. It gives you stamina recovery by 4% and then reduces the cost of your stamina skills by 2%. And again, that's per medium piece of armor. And then finally, I think the agility passive is very important as well. This gives you weapon and spell damage increased by 2% per piece of medium armor. I think you can see with all of these, both light and medium armor passives now benefit hybrids pretty much equally, with light armor being a little bit more focused on that critical chance stat as well as penetration, and then medium armor being a little bit more focused on critical damage as well as weapon and spell damage. Now, the sustain passives are probably just as important, if not more important. Let's say you're using mostly Magicka abilities, you're still going to want a fair amount of light armor pieces equipped, and that's for the extra Magicka recovery and the cost reduction of those Magicka skills. If you're not wearing any light armor at all and you have mostly Magicka skills, your sustain will basically run out after one rotation or so just because you don't have the right passives. Same thing with medium armor. If you're using mostly stamina-based skills, you want a good amount of medium armor pieces to reduce their cost and to also give you higher stamina recovery. Now, if you're playing as a true split stat hybrid, where maybe you have 5 stamina skills and 5 Magicka skills, well, then you could split your armor pieces in half as well. You could maybe wear 3 pieces of light, 3 pieces of medium, and 1 piece of heavy. What does heavy do, by the way? It hasn't really changed at all. This still increases your physical and spell resistance. It gives you some health recovery and sustain, more max health, and then better heavy attack sustain and healing received. So think of heavy armor as more of your survivability passives. This is really good for, I would say, solo builds, for PvP builds, where you really want to up your survival a little bit. Then yeah, you can wear some pieces of heavy and throw those into the mix. And lastly, I will say it's not an armor passive, but it is related to armor. Making sure that you pick up Undaunted Metal from the Undaunted skill line. This will give you up to 6% extra health, stamina, and Magicka if you're using all 3 types of armor. So that is still a very useful passive, especially for hybrid builds, where you can see with these armor passives, we probably will be using all 3 of them anyways, and so we'll be getting 6% extra max stats for doing that. And in terms of weapon skills, just to show you how these can benefit hybrids now as well. For two-handed weapons, swords now increase both weapon and spell damage. Axes increase critical damage done, and maces increase your armor penetration. You can see all of those values are hybridized. So yes, using a two-hander on a Magicka build does make sense because you'll get extra damage or extra crit chance or extra penetration depending on the type of weapon that you use. Very similar to dual wield, by the way. So passives like dual wield expert now increase your weapon and your spell damage. And twin blade and blunt has a similar effect here. Axes increase critical damage. Maces increase armor penetration. Swords increase weapon and spell damage. And daggers increase critical chance. So this has been known for a while now, but you can get a good crit chance boost on a Magicka build by running 2 daggers. So most weapon passives in ESO are hybridized now in the same sense that armor passives are. And this makes it really easy to set up a hybrid build in ESO. Lastly, let's talk about guild passives. We already mentioned the Undaunted skill line. Picking up Undaunted Metal is going to be very important for setting up your hybrid build and maxing out your stats. That's always been true. But some of the guild skills have also been updated for hybrid builds. Talking specifically about the Fighters Guild passives. We'll get more into the buffs in detail in a minute, but I just wanted to point out the Slayer passive, which was recently changed to weapon and spell damage. That means you can run this on a Magicka build, and it works very well on hybrids. And same thing for Banish the Wicked. You probably do want a Fighters Guild ability on your front bar if you can slot it, just for the extra ultimate generation. So moving right along from passives, let's dive into buffs, which have also been a major challenge when it comes to creating an efficient hybrid build in ESO. Now remember that the definition of hybrid is just that you're using both Magicka and stamina abilities on your character. But in order to make those skills as strong as possible, you needed basically all the buffs in the game, including Major Brutality and Major Sorcery. Those buff your weapon and spell damage. Then of course you have Major Savagery and Major Prophecy. Those you need to buff your weapon critical and your spell critical. Then you needed other things like Major Fracture and Major Breach to debuff both types of armor on enemies, and so on and so on. So it hasn't always been easy to create hybrid builds in this game. But things have started to change for the better in terms of some buffs being combined, and also many skills in the game now giving both the stamina version and the Magicka version of these important buffs. For example, a recent change is that any skill in ESO that debuffs armor now debuffs both physical and spell resistance at the same time. Now this is huge, especially for hybrid builds, because it means both your Magicka and your stamina skills will hit equally as strong. A variety of class skills in the game provide this, but if you don't have Breach on your class, you can also get this from general skills like Razor Caltrops from the Alliance War skill line, or Elemental Drain from the Destruction Staff skill line. Now another example is that both Major Brutality and Major Sorcery are now together whenever they're part of a skill. So class buffs like Nightblade Sap Essence, Warden's Netch, Sorcerer's Critical Surge, all of those again give both versions of the buff, which is very important. And moving forward into Update 33, there are even going to be some new applications, some new skills that are going to have these important damage buffs attached to open up even more options for builds. Now this includes the Degeneration skill from the Mages Guild skill line. This is a fantastic ranged option. It's great for bow builds, great for stamina builds that want an extra dot. Venom Arrow from the bow skill line is getting the same treatment. It's going to give you both Major Brutality and Major Sorcery, coming in Update 33. And my personal favorite, both Rally and Forward Momentum from the two-handed skill line, same thing. You're going to get both Major Brutality and Major Sorcery. This is awesome for hybrid builds because two-hand is such a good weapon overall. And opening up that two-handed skill line, especially for Magicka focus build, is going to be really interesting moving forward in the game. So as you can see, tons of changes to buffs in ESO are making it easier than ever to set up a hybrid build for yourself. But there's one final major change we need to talk about. This is the big one. This is dynamic scaling. Right, so dynamic scaling, what is it? Basically what it means is that any offensive skills or healing skills will no longer scale with the resources that you use to cast them. Instead, they will increase in power and efficiency based on your highest offensive stats, whether that is your stamina pool and your weapon damage, or if that's your Magicka pool and your spell damage. All right, so I want to jump on the PTS again really quick just to show you a more specific example. Here is my recent Update 33 build called the Blood Knight. So it's a hybrid Nightblade setup, but you can see my stats here are very focused on the stamina side. I have 30k stamina and 5,000 weapon damage. Those are my main offensive stats. much higher than my Magicka pool, which is only 1400, and my spell damage, which is only 3500. So I would call this more like a stamina-focused hybrid, but it is basically a hybrid build because of the way that we've set it up. Now, to show you an example of dynamic stat scaling, we can just look at Surprise Attack from the Shadow skill line and look at both morphs. Here's my Surprise Attack tooltip, 9428. This is unbuffed right now. So that's basically what you would expect from, a stamina-focused Nightblade, where your main stats are max stamina and weapon damage. That's pretty typical. Now, the other morph, which is a Magicka morph, normally we would see a much lower tooltip on concealed weapon, but when we look at this, 9428 magic damage, it's exactly the same amount of damage choosing Surprise Attack versus concealed weapon. And again, the reason for that is the new system of dynamic stat scaling, which is coming into effect here really soon in update 33. I can actually show you my stats one more time. Let me go back up to 5k weapon damage. And if we look at those tooltips one more time, I increased my weapon damage. That was a weapon power potion. And my Surprise Attack went up to 10k for 6.2, and concealed weapon also went up at the same time. Same, again, damage number by increasing my weapon damage and nothing else, basically. So that's dynamic stat scaling in action. What does that mean for, your hybrid setups and all of your options? Well, basically it means any skill is now a possibility for your setup. I mean, there's really no limit to what you can use now on a build. One thing I was trying on this build, the reason why I call it a Blood Knight build, is because I'm using a majority of stamina, DPS skills on the front bar, but I'm also using siphoning abilities. So you can see like my Swallow Soul tooltip here is pretty high. It's almost as high as Surprise Attack. And that's because it's scaling up with my stamina and my weapon damage. So not only can I use this for DPS on this stamina-focused Nightblade, but I can use it for some nice passive healing. If I wanted to, I could even run, Power Extraction, or I could switch it over to Sap Essence because they do, again, the same amount of damage. And I can choose now, based on how I want to play my build, what skills and which morphs I'm going to use. So that's really everything you need to know about hybrid builds for the Elder Scrolls Online. And to answer our question, do I think hybrid builds are a viable playstyle in the game? Yes, 100% I do at this point. I mean, with all the recent changes we've seen, whether it's been updated armor sets or passives, skills, or the new dynamic stat scaling system, I think hybrids are in the best place they've ever been for ESO. If you haven't considered this yet, it's definitely a playstyle that I recommend you check out. And you can start slowly, just add in a few extra skills here and there that don't use your main resource. It's going to make your build better. And from my perspective, it's just a lot more fun to play this way. So hopefully that gives you some ideas for moving forward in ESO with your own hybrid build. Of course, you can continue to watch my channel. I'll be putting out hybrid builds all the time. But also let me know down in the comment section, what types of hybrid builds are you guys excited to play in the next patch? Definitely be interested in reading those. As always, if you enjoyed the video today, if you found it informative, do me a favor, crush that like button. It absolutely helps out the channel. Make sure you're subscribed with your notifications on so you don't miss any of those new builds as they hit YouTube. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, we do have a YouTube membership where our members get lots of great perks like early access to videos, members-only live streams, and our complete members-only build library. Lots of great content there. Click on that join button down below for more information about that. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. Hope you're doing well. Stay safe out there, and I will see you around in the next video.